Hello and welcome to Crossroads Radio. I'm your host John and this is I-House New York. Today we're talking with our special guest Shannon from South Africa, and she's going to tell us her story. Welcome, Shannon.
Thanks John.
So let's get started. Tell us a little bit about how you made your way to I-House, and let's just go.
Right, so I was living in South Africa, in Cape Town, in the Western Cape, and I was working at an NGO that was basically the kind of place where young South Africans who had just finished schooling, who had just finished high school, could come and actually get a certificate in performing arts.
Wow.
And it was called New Africa Theatre Association, or NATA as we called it. I was the academy manager for about 2 years there, and while I was there I taught literacy and basic skills to the students around learning their scripts and how to carry their voices across to an audience.
Mm-hmm.
So the certificate was just a short program, and these students would not necessarily be able to afford going into tertiary education, so that's why the certificate was available to them. So one day I was sitting in my office and I was going through scholarships for the students to see if I could get scholarships for these students so that they could actually go to tertiary education using the certificate that they would have gained from us. And as I'm going through, I've happened to come across the Fulbright website. And as I was going through, I was saying, oh, students don't have that, they don't have that, they don't have that. And as I was about to leave the site, I suddenly thought, but I have that, and I have that, and maybe I should apply. So it was one of those very crazy incidents where
maybe this is for me.
Exactly. So
Cool.
I applied for the Fulbright and literally forgot about it for probably about a year and a half. Just had applied and then left it, and then suddenly I started about 9 months after I applied, was getting responses and calls and saying we need to set up an interview.
Wow.
And you're on a shortlist. And I was sort of, the first call was, you're on a shortlist for what? You know? And we were just had the interview. It was a long hour, I think it was just under an hour interview. It was a conference call between South Africa and the US.
Oh.
And it was pretty amazing. They asked 101 questions and I had to answer everything very well.
Yeah.
And have it all ready. And then when I finally received the Fulbright, I literally had 3 months to sort out my life in South Africa and get ready and come to the US. So I received it in April, and by August I had to be here. So obviously it was quite rushed. I had to finish my rent and give up my notice in at my house. I had to sell my car. I had to do all these crazy things and move everything from Cape Town to Pretoria, because my parents live in Pretoria and I was living in Cape Town. So I had to put everything in storage at my parents' house. So I had to organize that between April and August, and by August, the middle of August, I had to be in the US. So I suddenly started looking online for accommodation, and Teachers College was suggested to me. And when I was looking through, I realized that some of the dorms had both undergrad and grad students.
Yeah.
And being an older student, because I'd already had my 9 years of teaching experience in South Africa, I thought it would be a much better option to come and live at I-House, which had just the grad students.
Right. Very different experience.
So yeah, and that's how I did it. I did an online tour of the house, and my parents were there with me at the internet cafe. It was quite funny because we'd gone out for coffee to celebrate, and for lunch, and then I went to the internet cafe nearby, and they were standing behind me, and I was showing them where I possibly would be living, and my dad was just blown away. He was like, wow, chandeliers, and wow, huge rooms, and look at the park. So yeah, so I was really fingers crossed that I would get this accommodation.
I had a similar experience when I was telling people about where I was living. It's like, we have our own gym and a pub, and there's like, this is great. And at the time I was in Tibet, so it was from my dorm room in Tibet to like, I have my own gym and I'm gonna have a pub in my house. It was pretty glamorous.
Crazy.
I actually wanted to share a personal story about you. Just the other night when we were having that, actually the I-House Gala, and they were introducing you.
Yes.
I was like, see, for our audience, I had met Shannon before just on a personal basis, walking around the house, seeing you in the dining hall, and we had some just wonderful interactions, and I knew how kind you were, and how we had some nice conversations on a variety of subjects, and it's like, oh, what a wonderful woman, And then I had no idea that you were this amazingly accomplished person with like Fulbright scholar. I was like, oh my! And so at the International House Gala, I was sitting there and they were introducing me. I was like, wow, do I know this person? This is so amazing. And then all of a sudden it was you, and I was like, oh my gosh, she's even more amazing than I thought.
I'm blushing. I wish the audience could see.
I mean, and it's not like I didn't think like that it couldn't be you. I was like, who is this? Who is this amazing person? Because of course, you know, you have such you're not very arrogant. You don't like carry that around with you. You just seem like you're a very open, kind person, and you're involved in the house, and you know, you're selfless in how much time you give, because I see you involved in so many things. And anyway, it's a pleasure to have met you, and so it's really nice to have you on the show.
That's great. Thank you, John.
And I guess in that vein, could you talk a little bit about your time organizing for
Sure.
South Africa Cultural Hour?
Sure. So I love being involved in the house. I think it's a very important part of something I've actually learned in the US, the whole philanthropic culture here. It's very big. And coming from a country that often receives funding and receives a lot of help from abroad, it's very interesting to see how that help comes about and how people sort of organize themselves into groups and funding organizations and NGOs. It's been extremely a huge learning curve for me here to come here and see the other side of the process. So when I came here and I had to fill in my application, on the I-House application it asks, what would you like to be involved in? So when I'd looked on the website, I'd seen all the things that you could do, and I was basically, how about everything? You know, because it just all seems so amazing. So for 3 years now I've been involved in the International House tutorial program. I've taught my student. He started off at 14 and he's now 17.
Wow.
So it's pretty amazing to have seen him progress. He's an older student. We don't usually have older students, but because his two younger sisters were in the program and because my background is high school education, I offered to take him. And it's been wonderful. Every Friday for 2 hours we sit in the map lounge and we go through his homework, we do organizational skills, we talk about his week, he tells me any issues that he has at school. It's just been, I think the mentoring is so much more important actually than the content. And I've always said this, as an educator, you can be sitting in front of a class and teaching them, you know, so much content, but it's not the content they leave with. They leave with that feeling that you have shared something with them and you have this wonderful relationship with them. So for me, mentoring is such an important issue. So I've loved that. I've been involved there for 3 years. In my first year, I was the Vice President of the Residence Council, and that was really an incredible experience because we were led by an incredibly vivacious President, Eva Provedel. She's now involved in Italy, in politics in Italy, which is quite interesting. So she's just, you know, it just shows how small things can put the seed down for much bigger growth. You know? And then I've been involved in the cultural hours, as you said. First we had the West African Cultural Hours, so we focused on West Africa as a kind of a region. We looked at excuse me, the food, we looked at the dress. We had a beautiful fashion show with all the gorgeous colors and the gorgeous materials you can buy and have made there, and such a beautiful involvement of the West Africans in I-House. The following year we had a Uganda Kenya Culture Hour, and because we had a huge group of Ugandans and Kenyans, and I learned so much about other parts of Africa. It's quite interesting. As an African, you don't usually travel within Africa. You tend to travel to Europe or to America. You don't usually, you know, see the rest of your own continent. And I was just so lucky to see the continent through the eyes of my fellow Africans, you know. And then this year we put together the South African Cultural Hour. And the idea that I wanted to bring across with that is that this year was 18 years since South Africa received democracy, and it's only 18 years, which is kind of the lifespan of a young adult, you know, and that's a very small amount of years. It's a really small period of time, basically, So we're expecting so much to change, excuse me, and not you know, you can't expect that much to happen in 18 years, but I really feel that as far as people's perceptions of each other and their understanding of each other, I think that has definitely grown. And I wanted to bring that across in the cultural hour. So I didn't want to focus on the past, but I wanted to represent the past. So we showed a video of June 16th, which is a terrible day in South African history when a lot of children were protesting against Bantu education, which was the enforced education at the time,
Right.
where a lot of students were forced to be taught in Afrikaans, and that wasn't a language they knew or they wanted to be taught in. So there was a protest, and a lot of children were actually shot and killed on that day. And so it's a day in history that we don't, when we look at as something that happened, but we don't want that obviously to ever be repeated again.
Right.
It's something that we always hope that will have changed with perceptions and attitudes. So we showed a clip of that, but the rest of the program I wanted to show the positive attitude that South Africans have. So we showed, we did dances, we had songs, the choir sang the national anthem, we did a little piece from the World Cup, we had the song, Shakira's song. Yeah, we had that, and it was so much fun. Just getting together as a group. And what was amazing for me is it wasn't just Africans who joined together to do this. We had so many Americans and so many international students joining us on stage, which was just fantastic.
I think that's a really special part about Cultural Hour, and it's not something that's obvious. It wasn't obvious to me. It's like, getting involved in Cultural Hours, it's like, oh, it's South Africa Cultural Hour, or it's Israel Cultural Hour, Palestine, and or New York Cultural Hour. Like, oh, I'm not from New York, or I'm not from the U.S. That doesn't matter. I'm not from South Africa. It doesn't matter. And I thought that's so cool. Or just our past, New Zealand, Australia. Right. It's like I saw so many people, from Poland and America in it. So I thought that was really.
It's so amazing because I've actually talked to a lot of people who've been involved in the Cultural Hours, especially the ones who learnt the songs and the dances, and to this day they still remember the words of the songs and dances. Right. So if they ever do travel to those countries, they immediately have a bond with the people because of the what they've learnt. For us as well, the song, I've just forgotten the words now, for Kenya, Hakuna Matata, and we do a whole greeting song. We learned that when a lot of the...
And I'm guessing it's not the Disney song.
No,
right?
No, it's not the Disney song. It's a welcome one. I've just forgotten the words right now. But anyway, so and a lot of my friends who have learnt the dances, they still, when we have pub parties or when we have the galas and things like that, we all get together and we do the steps to the song, especially to the music. That's so great.
And the chorus, the I-House chorus, they had a whole concert based on these songs that they learned at the beginning of the year. I think it was inspiring for the director.
That's great. Emily's a fantastic director. She actually has been to South Africa and she learned a lot of the songs while she was there, and still holds the sort of spirit of the choral verse, and tried to convey that. I think it was beautifully done, really beautifully done.
I thought that was pretty special. So so you're all over the house.
Yeah.
And that's always great. It's always great to see you walking around because you're always so cheerful and a lot of great positive energy. And I think that is something the house feeds off of. And so that's great. But this is your third year.
Yes.
So you will be leaving because as I-House goes, you're limited to 3 years total.
So I've been here for 3 years and basically have to leave at the middle of August. That's when my visa expires, so I'll be going home. At the moment I'm working as an educational consultant for a private education company here in New York. We go into schools and we kind of fix issues that are problems, for example, especially around professional development and curriculum development. So our consultants go into schools, speak with the staff and the students, and get an idea of what the school is missing, and then create that gap and try and fill that gap. So we have a minimum of 10 days throughout the whole school year at that school, but what often happens is the school asks for more days. So then we fill up the gap with more days, and each consultant gets at least 3 schools for the year to work with.
Really so you get that amount of time. That's a good amount of time. Then it's not just like fix it in a month.
Exactly. Well, that's what I like about this program, is that it's pretty sustainable, because you can implement something in the first semester, and for each semester you can follow up, and so that when you come to the last day of your 10 days, for example, you actually have a full circle of curriculum that you've worked with, or professional development that you've created and fulfilled. So it's really a good model, I feel. It's not one of those fix-it-quick schemes that often happens with these programs.
So do you have any stories about that of success or trials and tribulations?
Well, part
like
of
to share?
so that's the for-profit side of the business that I work with. The non-for-profit side is an NGO called Lit World, and I work very closely with the organizer Pam Allen. She used to be an alum. She's an alum from Teachers College.
Okay.
And I heard about her, strangely enough, through I-House, because there was an event here.
Is it strange?
So I was at an event here in the pub. It was some random dance show, and they were showing Irish dance. So I was very interested because my mum is Irish.
Oh, cool.
And I went to the pub just to sit and listen. And there was a young guy there who was handing out leaflets. He was actually a high school student, and he was handing out leaflets about this thing. About solar-powered lights, and I was very interested because in most parts of Africa, electricity is a big issue still, especially in rural areas. And I was very interested because he had done research. He'd been on holiday and seen kids sort of battling over kerosene lamps, trying to do their homework at night. And so he decided that that was something he could definitely do and put together this model of a light. And when I spoke to him, I said, well, who are you doing this through, or who are you, working with?
Yeah.
And he was saying, well, a company that's really interested is Lit World, and they do global literacy projects already. So they wanted to incorporate these solar-powered lights with these literacy projects. So I was so interested, and then he gave me his number, and he was actually the son of a board member here at I-House, which was so interesting how this all works. Yeah. And then I contacted Pam, and Pam and I started talking, and then I was lucky enough to receive the $10,000 grant, the Davis Peace Project, which is another scholarship here at the house.
An amazing program we have, yeah.
So what happens is you get a $10,000, you send in an application, and usually around 9 to 10 projects are accepted, and it's a $10,000 grant to then go and do a peace project anywhere in the world. So I chose South Africa and the Western Cape, where I had worked before, because I knew of 5 primary schools that were linked by a social network, but they weren't using the network, and they'd also received a lot of technology but weren't necessarily using it. So I put the project together so that we could build on the social network and become more of a network that they used for both social events as well as for best practices. So be able to actually share their materials with each other in the schools, like this works brilliantly for math, why don't you try this, that kind of thing. And then with the technology, I assisted the teachers to just learn the basic, it was Microsoft Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, and from that write their own personal story and then present it to the rest of the teachers. So we had a 2-week program that we did this. So they recorded their voices, they added photos, they added clips of things that they had done, background noises. So they really knew how to use those 3 pieces really, really well by the end. And the final event was a huge smart board. And what they had done, which I thought was very clever, is in the hall they have a gallery area, and they have a smart board up there with a kind of a conference table, and that's where they have their staff meetings, and it's with a whiteboard, which is amazing, one of these smart boards, because you can then just have a PowerPoint and just reflect it on there. Instantly. You can touch it, you can move it around. It's really, really interactive, and the staff use that, which is wonderful, and it's good. It's also for training. So we used that, and all the staff sat around. There were 28 teachers in the school, so they all sat around. The principal was at the back, and they had the screen up, and every single video, so we listened to 28 PowerPoints of 3 minutes each. So it was a really long event.
Wow.
But it was absolutely beautiful because the teachers themselves had created it, they'd written their own story, they had added information to it, and it was then displayed. And it was the most really powerful. There were a lot of tears in the room by the end, because a lot of them had remembered. I said to them, try and think of a story that was related to education, something that you remember of the past or something. And a lot of them were very sad. But yeah, it was an incredible experience. And so I had done this peace project in the Western Cape, and I really appreciated the fact that I-House had this scholarship. And I had gone off track now, so
it's okay. It's okay. That's exactly what we wanted to hear. So talk a little bit about the program you did at Teachers College.
Oh, right.
So now we know what you've kind of done with it.
So Teachers College, I studied a master's in teaching English to speakers of other languages. Before that, I had about 9 years of teaching experience internationally. I'd started teaching in South Africa and then moved to the UK for 4 years. And between the UK and coming back to South Africa, I had traveled to New Zealand, Namibia, and India. So I'd had sort of teaching experience around the world, found certain issues to be quite interestingly covered across the range. Like discipline, for example, was something that was dealt with very differently in different countries and was always something to talk about. Classroom sizes, for example, and classroom management in general. It's interesting that the curriculum was never really discussed. It was always these other issues, these sort of outside issues that needed to be discussed. But just an extremely amazing experience to have traveled. And then when I came to Teachers College, I felt that it felt right because it had been, I had this teaching experience, and I also felt that it was time now to get to further my academic career.
Right.
And it was a really amazing experience. Teachers College really, it deals a lot with the theory of teaching, but it also gives you the chance to practice it. So we have what's called the Community English Program, the CEP, and you teach 2 semesters, a minimum of 2 semesters, to adults in the community, in the Teachers College community. So it could be the spouses of people who are studying their programs here, or it could be friends or family members, or it could be the community at large. So this area, the Teachers College area. And you teach a 6-week course of English, depending on the level of those students. So they come in at the beginning of the semester and they get tested for their speaking and listening, their reading and their writing skills. They get put into a band, so it's from beginners all the way to advanced.
Okay.
And then you then get allocated, or you can also choose which level you'd feel more comfortable doing. So I always loved the advanced levels because I felt that I loved to challenge the students, you know, and because they were adults, it was really nice to use their life as a base to jump from. So we could I asked them to give presentations on what they do, what they did back in their home country, what they're doing now, and we often used food as a unifying factor because food is something we all have to do. We have to eat, we all have to.
It works for me.
Ingest, yeah. So we would use food as a very good topic to discuss. What are likes, what are dislikes, what are what are foods that you like to cook, foods that you would never eat, things like that, and how they've found especially American foods and American culture. It was a great starting point for conversations. So that was one of my favorite parts of the whole Teachers College experience, was the actual practical teaching.
And in that program teaching English, how much leeway was there for you to develop your own materials, or was it a set structure?
So most of it from beginners to pre-advanced class was a set structure. You could add your own materials, but you had to cover certain pieces, and you were given a textbook to follow.
Okay.
But when you got to the advanced courses, you could adapt it and create your own curriculum. So that's why I particularly like the advanced courses as well, because we would do excursions. So especially during the summer course, I did a summer course with them, and it was a shortened course. I think it was only 4 weeks, but it was intensive. So it was 4 days a week for 4 weeks. And we would do the 3 days, and on the 4th day I would take them on an excursion. So we went, one day we went to, in Bryant Park, where they do the theatre in the park. And they had the musicals on the stage, and you could listen to 3 or 4 songs from 3 or 4 different musicals while you're sitting there in the park just enjoying the sunshine. So I took them there, but before we went for the whole day, each day was focused on a different musical that we were going to watch. And I got them each to write up a presentation about, just to give a couple of facts about the actual musical. Fun facts though, not the usual things that you would hear. And then at the park, I got them to sit in a circle and one by one stand up and present their pieces just before the show, and they would talk about, this is the musical, this is the original cast, it was played on Broadway in these days, just some interesting facts and some really fun facts. And they all got to do that, and what was so funny is we drew such a huge crowd to our little circle in Bryant Park. There were about 30 people standing around us just listening. And my students were so involved in their presentations, they weren't even watching, but the crowd was.
They didn't even notice the crowd. Oh, that's great.
So at the end, we'd finished, and I said, "Guys, you did a wonderful job," and I gave them a round, and this whole crowd of 30 people started applauding for my students.
And they suddenly noticed that they had all on it.
Exactly, it was brilliant.
That's so funny.
So that's why I loved doing this course. It was very practical, and Teachers College itself is just such a beautiful building. They've kept it looking almost exactly like it did back in the day.
Right.
And
I think it looks like Hogwarts a little bit. So
totally, and the library is just gorgeous.
Yeah,
if you go up to the different levels, we've got about, I think it's 6 floors, something like that.
It is beautiful. It's a nice place to study. Okay, and so this being your last year, you're kind of transitioning back. You're gonna go home in the summer. What are some things that you'll miss? And
Wow.
I got a touch of this when you actually Shannon hosted the last Sunday supper, which is again a great event at I-House where it's open to everyone in I-House. You just sign up and you come and you eat a meal on these long tables they put in Davis Hall Auditorium, and you just get to have a conversation. We have a performance, and I loved your video about the history of the Sunday suppers, going back into I-House history, and Shannon put together a video of sorts, a visual tableau of the history with current I-House members, and it was well done. But in your final speech, you talked a little bit about it. So maybe if you could share a little bit about what you'll miss here.
Well, in the Sunday supper, the history has to be told every Sunday supper. So for us, we were all who've been here for 3 years. You hear it. I mean, I must have heard that 12 times now. That must have been the 12th time I heard the story in my 3 years. You know, so it's kind of I wanted something different, and I'd asked a couple of residents if they would be interested in posing for black and white pictures, because I used to use the Instagram option on my phone, and we posed for black and white photos of basically the story is Harry Edmonds. He was one of the people who had the idea about I-House. He was walking through Columbia campus one day and he bumped into a Chinese student and greeted him, and the Chinese student was so shocked at the greeting, and Harry Edmonds asked him, well, why are you shocked? And he was saying, well, I've been here for 3 weeks and no one's actually greeted me. And Harry Edmonds has had a profound effect on him, and he was very worried about international students coming to America and not actually interacting with Americans. So him and his wife Florence, they sat down and decided that they would host a couple of international students every weekend, every Sunday afternoon at their house. And initially it was just sort of sandwiches and a cup of tea. And eventually the interest was so big that they decided they had to actually do something about this and create a place for them to actually host these dinners, these lunches. And they spoke to their friends, the Rockefellers, and other very
good friends to have,
other important and influential people. And eventually the idea of I-House was then created. And so that's where we live today, which is pretty amazing.
Such a great story.
The things I'll miss, I'll definitely miss the people that I've met. I think that's an absolute obvious. Although we have Facebook, it's going to be very strange to wake up in the morning and not walk down the corridor and bump into about 6 people before you go to the bathroom, and you know. It's so amazing when you're sitting at a table and you're talking to new residents and you just hear about what they're busy with and their goals and their dreams, and it's very inspiring. Already I'm beginning to see the effects of knowing these people, because I'm hearing in the news and articles and reading articles and just hearing their names and realizing, oh my goodness, I was studying with you, or I was living with you at I-House, you know, and here you are becoming this famous person, you know. Just today I read on Facebook that a friend of mine was, she was in an article in the Cosmopolitan magazine, you know, so that's something different. Another friend of mine is working in Ghana on an NGO, and has been doing so for the last 3 years, goes there every summer to work with children in a band. So, you know, it's these amazing people who are doing amazing things in the world. I'm definitely going to miss that. I'll definitely miss the staff here. The staff are very genuine, I find. It's almost like, it feels like in their application process they had to write down why they wanted to be here, and I think a lot of them just love the idea of mixing with international students and just getting to stop and chat.
It's a wonderful constant, I think, that I-House has. Even though I've only been here for this year, this academic year, I just find immediately when you go to dining hall, when you go to the office, you go to missions, it's just warm and they make you feel comfortable. It's just like, all right, what can I help you with, basically?
And being involved in so many activities, I work very closely with the programs office, and it's run so efficiently by Susan Storms. It's just absolutely brilliant. Sarit as well, and I was here with Tate and Amber and Lauren, and it's ran so smoothly. You could ask any question, you could come in at any time.
Yeah.
And I would always say, do you have a few minutes? And Amber would say, of course. And it wasn't even a question, you didn't even need to say that.
It feels like they're always open.
Yes.
The programs on
Yeah.
Sweet Class, they're still here. That's
Definitely.
strange. And this show is a product of the
Totally.
program's office, so
Yeah.
I can't agree with you more.
I think the other thing I'm going to miss is the space in the house. I mean,
Yeah.
although the rooms, we always complain how small our rooms are, it's only a place for me to sleep. Seriously, I
Exactly.
spend all my time everywhere else in the house and try and just get involved in as many different areas in the house as possible. So I've tried to see and hope I can say that I've seen every part of the house,
Yeah.
from the rooftop, the green terrace, gone through all the little corridors and back entrances and funny little, places. So yeah, I feel like I'm gonna miss the house itself very much as well.
Yeah.
So
We're pretty lucky, I must say.
definitely.
I recently had the experience of bringing new people, like friends over, and they're just their jaw drops.
Blown away. My brother came for my graduation last year, and I said this at the gala, that seeing the house through his eyes after being here for 2 years and then him coming to visit me, I suddenly realized everything that I was taking for granted.
Yeah.
He mentioned at breakfast, wow, look at the variety of food. And I
Yeah.
all we seem to have done is complain about, it doesn't have enough food or doesn't have enough variety. Meanwhile, there's a huge display every time you come down for food.
Yeah.
So we
Fresh
take it.
juice. It's pretty crazy.
We take a lot of it for granted. Also, I think just having the people around you all the time, having this community, it becomes a community. It becomes, you look forward to actually coming home at the end of the day because you're going to see a friend. I was the floor resident fellow for the 4th floor this year, and just to get closer to your own residents, you see them in the hall. Hey, how you doing? Checking on them, making sure everything's okay. And them being responsible for each other as well. I think that's what's pretty amazing. When someone comes to you and says, oh, so-and-so is really stressed at the moment. They're having a lot of problems with exams. Their parents are coming in a few weeks and they can't find a place to host them, and you ask a few questions and within a few hours you've got a place for the parents to stay.
Right.
You've helped them with the problem, and it's just awesome that we've come together as a community like that.
Yeah, it really is. Community is a wonderful word to sum it up, I think. And I don't know if it was possible, but I'm even more impressed with you after hearing more detail about your life and things, and so it's been such a pleasure to have you on the show.
It's been wonderful to talk to you.
And I think this is actually the last show of the season, of our radio show season, I guess you could say. And so it's nice to have such a special guest as you.
Thank you, John.
And I think I-House will miss you definitely. And I look forward to hearing good things about you in the future.
Thank you.
And so that's it for I-House Radio, I-House New York, and you will be hearing from me soon.